People like you don't belong in places like this. The words cut through the air like a blade, sharp and deliberate. Gavin Holt leaned back in his chair, a smug grin plastered across his face as he watched Darius Monroe set down their entrees. His tone dripped with condescension, loud enough for nearby tables to hear but casual enough to mask it as harmless banter. Darius froze for a fraction of a second, his hand steady on the tray despite the storm brewing inside him. He met Gavin's gaze briefly, his dark eyes unreadable before offering a polite nod. "Is there anything else I can get for you, sir?" His voice was calm, professional, a shield against the sting of Gavin's words. "Oh no," Gavin chuckled, glancing at his companions who mirrored his amusement. "I think we've got everything we need. Right, folks?" His friends nodded, chuckling along as though they were part of some private joke Darius wasn't privy to. But Darius didn't respond. Instead, he straightened up, forcing a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. There was something brewing beneath his composed exterior, something he couldn't afford to let spill over here. Not now. As he turned away from the table, he caught snippets of their conversation trailing behind him. Honestly, these people should stick to what they're good at. What they thought he was good at gnawed at him, but he pushed forward, refocusing on the next task. He had work to do and plans to execute. Each step Darius took away from Gavin's table felt heavier than the last. The weight of Gavin's words lingered, clinging to him like an unwelcome shadow. It wasn't just tonight, it was every night. Every dismissive glance, every offhand comment about how someone like him didn't fit into spaces like the grand table. Over time, those moments added up, chipping away at his resolve bit by bit. He paused near the kitchen doorway, gripping the edge of his tray tighter than necessary. His mind wandered back to the dream he'd been nurturing since childhood, opening his own restaurant. A place where everyone felt welcome, regardless of race or background. A space built on authenticity, hard work, and respect. But dreams like that weren't easy to chase when the world kept reminding you that you didn't belong. Tonight had been particularly grating, not because of Gavin's arrogance, that was nothing new, but because of the ease with which his friends had laughed. They hadn't even questioned his prejudice. They simply accepted it as truth, and that hurt more than anything else. Still, Darius knew better than to let emotions cloud his judgment. He exhaled slowly, composing himself before heading back out, onto the floor. He scanned the room, noting the bustling energy of the dining area. Somewhere deep down, he reminded himself why he endured nights like this, for the chance to prove them all wrong someday. As he approached another table, ready to continue serving, his thoughts shifted toward the group led by Gavin. What would happen if they tried skipping out on the bill? The idea flickered in his mind, unbidden but intriguing. If nothing else, tonight might give him an opportunity to turn the tables, literally. It happened faster than anyone expected. Gavin and his group stood abruptly, signaling their departure. Without so much as a glance at the check, Darius noticed immediately, his pulse quickening as he intercepted them near the exit. "Excuse me, Mr. Holt," he said smoothly, stepping into their path. His demeanor remained calm, almost too calm, as Gavin raised an eyebrow. "Yes? Something wrong?" Gavin asked, feigning innocence while his friends exchanged amused looks. "No, sir," Darius replied evenly. "Just wanted to inform you that your bill has already been taken care of." Dead silence fell over the group. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Gavin sputtered, "What do you mean, taken care of? Did someone cover it for us?" "No," Darius clarified, his tone firm but measured. "I covered it myself, with my personal credit card." Gasps rippled through the surrounding diners. One woman whispered audibly, "Did he really just say that?" Another muttered, "Unbelievable." Gavin's face flushed red, embarrassment warring with anger. "You think this is funny? Some kind of stunt?" "No stunt," Darius countered, meeting Gavin's glare head-on. "Consider the score. Now we're even." The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to choke on. Gavin opened his mouth to retort, But his words died on his lips as murmurs spread among the crowd. Some patrons clapped softly, others stared in disbelief, and a few shot sympathetic glances at Darius. For once, Gavin found himself at a loss for words. His usual bravado faltered under the weight of collective judgment. Meanwhile, Darius stepped aside, allowing the group to leave, but not before planting a seed of doubt in everyone's minds. Who exactly was this waiter who could afford to pay such an extravagant bill? Whispers began circulating among the staff, hinting at connections far beyond what anyone initially assumed. By the time Gavin and his entourage disappeared out the door, speculation about Darius had reached a fever pitch. Servers huddled together, near the host stand, exchanging hushed theories. "Did you know he's related to Miriam Monroe?" one of them whispered, wide-eyed. "Miriam Monroe? The philanthropist?" another replied incredulously. The name alone carried weight. Miriam Monroe wasn't just wealthy. She was influential, known for her anti-poverty initiatives and tireless advocacy for marginalized communities. If Darius truly shared blood with her, then his actions tonight took on an entirely different meaning. Darius overheard fragments of the gossip as he cleared tables, pretending not to notice. Let them wonder. Let them talk. He didn't owe anyone an explanation, not yet anyway. Still, the revelation hovered in the air, adding layers to the narrative unfolding around him. Was this act of defiance fueled by privilege, or was it something deeper, rooted in lived experience and a desire to challenge systemic inequities? As the evening wore on, the whispers grew louder, drawing curious glances his way. Some customers approached him directly, asking questions cloaked as compliments. "You must come from strong roots," one older gentleman remarked, patting him on the shoulder. Darius smiled politely but offered little in response. The truth was complicated, far messier than any soundbite could capture. And though the spotlight burned brighter with each passing moment, he knew the real story was only beginning to unfold. What lay ahead remained uncertain. But one thing was clear: Darius Monroe wasn't done making waves. Unbeknownst to Darius, the entire exchange had been captured on camera. Lila Patel, a college student seated 2 tables away, had secretly recorded the confrontation on her phone. Her original intention was simply to document the blatant disrespect Gavin displayed. But when Darius revealed he'd paid the bill himself, she realized she had something far more powerful. A story that could spark outrage and inspire change. By midnight, the video was everywhere. Social media timelines buzzed with hashtags like #Justice for Darius and "Racism Exposed." Viewers dissected every word, every reaction, amplifying the tension between Gavin's arrogance and Darius's quiet defiance. Comments poured in, ranging from admiration for Darius's boldness to visceral anger at Gavin's audacity. But fame came with its own challenges. Within hours, trolls began attacking Darius online, accusing him of orchestrating the incident for clout. "He's just trying to get attention," one commenter sneered. "What kind of waiter can afford to pay $200 for someone else's meal?" The backlash hit hard, but what stung most were the insinuations about his motives. Was this act meant to reclaim dignity, now being twisted into something shallow? Darius scrolled through his notifications late that night, feeling the weight of public opinion pressing down on him. Still, not all responses were negative. Messages of support flooded in too, many from people who shared similar experiences of discrimination. "Thank you for standing up," one user wrote. "Your courage gives me hope." Another added, "We need more people like you willing to challenge these systems." As the sun rose the next morning, Darius knew the viral storm wasn't going to fade anytime soon. If anything, it was only beginning, and with it came questions about how far he was willing to take this fight. Gavin Holt wasted no time fighting back. By mid-morning, his PR team had crafted a carefully worded statement labeling Darius a fraud. "This so-called hero is nothing more than an opportunist seeking 15 minutes of fame," the post read. "His actions are calculated, manipulative, and entirely disingenuous." The smear campaign spread quickly, fueled by influencers and news outlets eager to capitalize on controversy. Headlines screamed, "Waiter staged elaborate hoax to shame wealthy patrons," and "Who is Darius Monroe really?" Doubt crept into the minds of even those who initially supported him. Darius found himself sitting across from Evan Brooks later that day, frustration simmering beneath the surface. "They're tearing me apart out there," he admitted, running a hand over his face. Evan leaned forward, his expression serious. "They're scared, man. You exposed Gavin for what he is, a racist bully hiding behind money and power. Now, they're scrambling to discredit you because they know the truth hurts. But it's working," Darius countered bitterly. "People are starting to doubt me. What if they stop caring before we can prove he's guilty of worse things?" "Then we don't let them," Evan replied firmly. "We use this momentum to dig deeper, expose the bigger picture, his illegal evictions, discriminatory policies. That's how we win." It was a risky strategy, but Darius couldn't deny the logic. He nodded slowly, determination flickering back to life. "All right, but we'll need proof. Solid evidence that shuts him down completely." As they strategized, Gavin doubled down on his narrative, appearing on morning radio shows to declare his innocence. "I've done nothing wrong," he insisted, his polished smile betraying no hint of guilt. "This young man is exploiting my reputation for personal gain." Yet even as Gavin spoke, cracks began forming in his facade. Behind the scenes, whispers of past misconduct grew louder. Somewhere out there, someone held the key to unraveling his empire, and Darius intended to find them. Back at the grand table, the fallout reached Darius in ways he hadn't anticipated. Natalie Cross, the restaurant owner, called him into her office the following afternoon. Her usually warm demeanor was replaced with thinly veiled panic. "You have to apologize," she said without preamble, pacing behind her desk. "Publicly, immediately, or I'll have no choice but to let you go." Darius blinked, taken aback. "Apologize for what? Standing up to racism?" "For causing a scene," Natalie snapped, though regret softened her tone almost instantly. "Look, I understand why you did what you did, but Gavin's threatening to pull his investment unless this blows over. Without his loan, we won't survive another quarter." The revelation struck like a gut punch. So that was it. The reason behind Gavin's inflated ego and sense of entitlement. He didn't just frequent the grand table, he practically owned it. "I can't apologize for speaking the truth," Darius said quietly, "and I won't ask others to stay silent while injustice happens right under our noses." Natalie sighed heavily, sinking into her chair. "I admire your principles, Darius, truly I do. But ideals don't pay bills. If you don't fix this, neither of us will have jobs to worry about." The ultimatum weighed heavily on Darius as he left the office. How could he reconcile standing up for justice with protecting those who depended on him? The line between right and practical blurred with each passing second. He knew one thing for certain: giving in wasn't an option. Not yet. Not until he exhausted every other possibility. That evening, Darius decided to confront his aunt, Miriam Monroe. Armed with fragments of information gleaned from late-night research, he arrived at her penthouse unannounced. She greeted him with surprise, ushering him inside. "What brings you here, sweetheart?" she asked warmly, though concern shadowed her eyes. "I need answers," Darius said bluntly, cutting straight to the point. "About Gavin Holt." Miriam stiffened visibly, her smile faltering. "What about him? You worked with him on a housing project years ago," Darius pressed. "One that displaced hundreds of low-income families. Why didn't you tell me?" Her silence spoke volumes. Finally, she sank onto the couch, resignation etched across her features. "It was a different time, Darius. I thought we were doing good work, providing affordable units elsewhere. But yes, mistakes were made. People suffered because of decisions I signed off on." Anger bubbled inside him, raw and unrelenting. "You didn't just sign off, Aunt Miriam. You co-signed contracts that destroyed lives. Families lost homes, businesses, communities. Also, Gavin could profit." "I know," she whispered, tears welling up. "And I live with that guilt every day. But what would exposing the truth accomplish now? It wouldn't undo the damage. It would only tarnish everything I've built since. Darius shook his head, disappointment slicing through him. It's not about saving your reputation, it's about accountability. Justice. Those families deserve restitution, Aunt Miriam. And if you won't help me fight for them, he trailed, off leaving the implication hanging in the air. Miriam stared at him, torn between loyalty to her legacy and love for her nephew. At that moment, Darius realized he might be facing this battle alone, but retreat wasn't an option. Not when the stakes were this high. Just as Darius was grappling with the weight of Miriam's confession, a knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Rachel Kim standing there, her arms crossed and a determined glint in her eye. "Darius Monroe?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Yes, can I help you?" he replied cautiously. Rachel stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, pulling a folder from her bag. "My name is Rachel Kim. I used to work for Gavin Holt. You need to see this." She spread documents across the coffee table, emails, contracts, internal memos, all detailing Gavin's illegal activities. There were eviction notices sent to minority tenants under false pretenses, discriminatory rental policies explicitly targeting low-income families, and evidence of kickbacks funneled through shell companies. "This is everything," Rachel said, firmly. "Proof that Gavin has been exploiting people for years. He destroyed lives, including mine. My family lost our home because of him." Her voice cracked slightly, but she steadied herself. "I'm done staying silent." Darius stared at the papers, his heart racing. This was more than he'd hoped for, a smoking gun that could dismantle Gavin's empire. But it also meant stepping further into the fray, risking everything to take on one of the city's most powerful men. "Why me?" he asked finally. "You could have gone to the press or law enforcement." "Because you're willing to fight," Rachel replied simply, "and because you understand what it means to stand up when no one else will. If anyone can make people care about this, it's you." Her faith in him was both humbling and terrifying. Darius took a deep breath, flipping through the documents. Each page painted a clearer picture of Gavin's greed and cruelty. It wasn't just racism. It was systematic oppression disguised as business savvy. "What happens if we go public with this?" Darius asked, looking up at Rachel. "We expose him," she said with quiet conviction. "We show the world exactly who Gavin Holt really is, and we give a voice to everyone he's silenced." For the first time since the incident at the grand table, Darius felt a flicker of hope. With Rachel's evidence, they had a real chance to hold Gavin accountable, not just for his words, but for his actions. But hope came with danger. As Rachel warned, "Once we start, there's no turning back. He'll come after us with everything he's got." Darius nodded, resolving hardening within him. "Then let's make sure he regrets picking this fight." True to Rachel's prediction, Gavin struck swiftly and mercilessly. Within days of the whistleblower documents surfacing online, his lawyers filed a defamation lawsuit against Darius, claiming emotional distress and financial losses totaling millions. The legal summons arrived via courier, accompanied by a smug message. "This ends now." Darius read the document in stunned silence. The sheer audacity of the claim was staggering. Gavin accused him of orchestrating the entire ordeal to extort money and tarnish his reputation. Worse still, the lawsuit demanded punitive damages that would bankrupt Darius 10 times over. "This is insane," Evan muttered, flipping through the paperwork later that evening. "He's trying to scare you into submission." "It's working," Darius admitted grimly. "Even if we win, fighting this will cost us everything. Legal fees alone are astronomical." Evan leaned back, rubbing his temples. "We need pro bono representation. Someone willing to take on a high-profile case like this. Maybe someone connected to Rachel's network?" As if on cue, Rachel appeared at the door, trailed by a tall, sharp-eyed woman in a tailored suit. "Darius, meet attorney Lena Park. She specializes in corporate malfeasance cases, and she's agreed to represent you." Lena extended her hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Mr. Monroe, I believe your case isn't just about justice for yourself. It's about setting a Precedent. Holding people like Gavin Holt accountable changes the game for everyone. Her confidence bolstered Darius's spirits, but the reality of the situation remained daunting. Every email exchange with Lena's team, every deposition preparation, chipped away at his energy and resources. Meanwhile, Gavin ramped up his PR offensive, portraying himself as the victim of a malicious smear campaign. News outlets ran stories questioning Darius's credibility, painting him as an opportunist out for revenge. Public opinion began to waver once again, yet amidst the chaos, Darius refused to back down. He reminded himself why he started this fight, not for fame or fortune, but for truth. And as exhausting as the battle became, he couldn't afford to lose. The strain of the lawsuit bled into every corner of Darius's life, including his relationship with his mother, Darius Monroe. One evening, she showed up unannounced, her face etched with worry. "Enough, Darius," she pleaded, pacing the living room. "Please stop this madness before it ruins us all. Your Aunt Miriam is beside herself, and now Gavin's dragging our family name through the mud." "I didn't ask for any of this." Darius shot back, frustration boiling over. "Gavin made this personal the moment he decided to attack me instead of answering for his crimes." "But at what cost?" Tasha cried, tears streaming down her face. "Do you think I don't want justice too? Do you think I haven't seen the same discrimination you have? But sometimes survival means knowing when to walk away." Her words hit like a punch to the gut. Survival. Was that what this was about? Walking away to preserve their fragile peace. "I'm not doing this for me, Mom," Darius said softly, his voice trembling. "I'm doing it for every person who's ever been told they don't belong. For every family Gavin displaced. For every kid growing up believing the system is rigged against them." Tasha sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I know, sweetheart. I see your heart. But I'm scared. For you, for us. What if none of this matters in the end?" It was a question Darius had asked himself countless times. Yet each time the answer came back stronger. Even if they failed, staying silent would have been worse. "I can't promise it won't hurt," he told her gently. "But I can promise I won't quit. Not until I've given everything I've got." Tasha didn't respond, but the look in her eyes said enough. Pride mixed with fear. A mother watching her son step into the fire, knowing she couldn't protect him anymore. The next day, Darius returned to Miriam's penthouse, armed with Rachel's documents and a steely determination. She greeted him warily, sensing the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. "You lied to me," he said bluntly, dropping the folder onto her dining table. "These aren't just mistakes, Aunt Miriam. These are crimes you helped commit." Miriam flinched, guilt flashing across her face. "I told you, I thought we were helping people. Affordable housing initiatives, economic development. Don't." Darius cut her off sharply. "Don't try to spin this. You co-signed these contracts knowing full well what they'd do. Families lost everything because of you and Gavin. I was young, naive," Miriam protested, her composure crumbling. "I trusted him to handle the details. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late to undo it." "Too late," Darius echoed bitterly. "Or too convenient, because walking away let you keep your precious reputation intact while others pay the price." She recoiled as though struck, tears spilling freely now. "What do you want from me, Darius? To throw myself on the sword? Ruin everything I've built to make amends for something decades old?" "No," he said quietly. "I want you to choose. Stand with me or stay silent. But if you stay silent, don't expect me to forgive you." The ultimatum hung heavy between them, a line drawn in the sand. Miriam stared at him, torn between self-preservation and redemption. "Finally," she whispered, "if I help you, what then?" "Then we rebuild," Darius replied, his voice steady. "Together, starting with the communities Gavin destroyed." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. The stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. Morning. Justice, a nationally televised talk show hosted by Dominique Hayes, known for tackling controversial topics head-on. Darius sat across from Gavin Holt, their chairs positioned like opposing chess pieces on a board. The studio audience buzzed with anticipation, sensing the electric tension between them. Dominique opened the segment with practiced ease. Welcome to Morning Justice. Today we're discussing an incident that has sparked widespread debate about privilege, accountability, and systemic racism. She turned to Gavin first. Mr. Holt, let's start with you. What's your side of the story? Gavin leaned forward, his polished smile oozing confidence. Thank you, Dominique. Let me be clear. This entire ordeal is nothing more than a publicity stunt orchestrated by Mr. Monroe. He paid my bill, staged a scene, and now claims I'm some kind of villain. It's absurd. Before Darius could respond, the audience murmured, in disapproval, clearly skeptical of Gavin's dismissive tone. Sensing the shift, Dominique pivoted to Darius. And what do you say to that, Mr. Monroe? Darius met Gavin's gaze steadily, his voice calm but firm. I didn't orchestrate anything. What happened that night was real, a reflection of how people like him treat those they see as beneath them. Paying the bill wasn't about revenge. It was about showing respect where none was given. The audience erupted into applause, forcing Gavin to sit back, momentarily rattled. His composure slipped just enough for Darius to notice and seize the advantage. Dominique pressed further. So this isn't just about one dinner tab? There's more at stake here. Much more, Darius replied, leaning slightly forward. This is about exposing decades of exploitation, discrimination, and harm caused by men like Gavin Holt. And today, the truth comes out. As the crowd cheered again, Gavin clenched his jaw, realizing he was losing control of the narrative. But little did either man know, the real fireworks were yet to come. Just as Gavin attempted to regain footing, the studio doors burst open. Rachel Kim marched onto the set, holding a stack of documents aloft like evidence in a courtroom drama. Gasps rippled through the audience as cameras swung to capture her entrance. Wait! Rachel called out, her voice cutting through the din. You need to see this. Dominique raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Ms. Kim, can you explain what's going on? Rachel strode directly to the host's desk, handing over the folder before turning to address the camera. These are internal records from Gavin Holt's company, proof of illegal evictions, discriminatory policies targeting minority tenants, and fraudulent financial practices. This man has been destroying lives for profit, and it's time the world knew. The room fell silent, save for the rustling of papers as Dominique flipped through the documents. Her expression shifted from curiosity to shock. If these allegations are true, she began, trailing off as she glanced at Gavin. Gavin shot up from his chair, sputtering. This is outrageous. Those documents are fake, doctored. Someone's framing me. But the damage was done. The audience erupted into chaos, some shouting accusations at Gavin, others applauding Rachel's bravery. Security guards moved toward her, but Dominique intervened. Let her speak. This is live television. We owe it to our viewers to hear the truth. Rachel locked eyes with Gavin, her voice unwavering. You took everything from innocent families. Now it's your turn to face consequences. Darius watched silently, pride swelling in his chest. This was the moment they'd been building toward, the tipping point where power shifted hands. Gavin, visibly shaken, tried to compose himself. Even if any of this were true, which it isn't, it doesn't change the fact that Darius staged this whole charade. Oh, but it does, Dominique interjected, holding up one damning memo. Because if Mr. Monroe hadn't exposed you, none of us would have seen this coming. So tell me, Mr. Holt, why does it feel like you're panicking? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the audience roared in approval. Gavin's empire was crumbling right before their eyes, but the worst was still to come. Just when it seemed Gavin had no cards left to play, he delivered a devastating counterattack. Turning to the camera, he sneered, You want to talk about betrayal? Fine, let's talk about Miriam Monroe. The name alone sent shockwaves through the audience. Whispers erupted as Gavin continued, his tone dripping with malice. Miriam co-signed every single contract tied to those illegal evictions. Without her approval, none of it would have happened. She's just as guilty as I am. Dominique froze, stunned. Is this true, Mr. Monroe? Your aunt was involved? All eyes turned to Darius, whose face hardened with resolve. Yes, he admitted quietly. I confronted her about it days ago. She confirmed her role in Gavin's schemes. The admission hit like a thunderclap. The audience murmured in disbelief, torn between sympathy for Darius and anger at Miriam's complicity. For a moment, it seemed Gavin might walk away unscathed, having deflected blame onto someone else. But Darius wasn't finished. Rising from his seat, he addressed the crowd. My aunt made mistakes, terrible ones, and yes, she deserves accountability. But unlike Gavin, she's willing to make amends. Together, we're launching a fund to rebuild the communities he destroyed. Gasps filled the room as Darius revealed a check already signed by Miriam, earmarked for affordable housing initiatives. This isn't about protecting reputations. It's about repairing the harm done, something Gavin will never understand. For the first time, Gavin looked genuinely afraid. His attempts to drag Miriam down had backfired spectacularly, leaving him isolated and exposed. Dominique seized the moment. It seems the tables have turned once again, Mr. Holt. Care to respond? Gavin opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to find words. The audience jeered, sealing his fate. With Gavin reeling, Darius seized the opportunity to deliver the final blow. Stepping closer to the microphone, he spoke not just to the studio audience but to everyone watching at home. I grew up privileged, not because of wealth but because of family connections. My Aunt Miriam gave me opportunities most people never get. Opportunities she built on foundations cracked by injustice. Tonight, I'm renouncing that privilege. The declaration stunned even Dominique. What do you mean, Mr. Monroe? Darius pulled out a legal document, holding it up for the cameras. This is my formal renunciation of any inheritance from Miriam Monroe's estate. Every penny will go toward funding affordable housing projects for displaced families. Because success isn't measured by what you keep. It's measured by what you give back. The audience erupted into applause, many rising to their feet. Tears streamed down faces as viewers processed the magnitude of Darius's sacrifice. Evan Rachel nodded approvingly, whispering, He's really doing it. Gavin scoffed, attempting one last jab. How noble of you. But let's be honest, you'll never survive without your family's money. Darius smiled faintly, unperturbed. Surviving isn't living, Mr. Holt, and I plan to live on my own terms. Unlike you, I don't need wealth or power to define me. His words struck a nerve, silencing Gavin completely. The contrast between the two men couldn't have been clearer. One clinging desperately to privilege, the other casting it aside to build something better. Dominique chimed in, her voice tinged with awe. That's quite a statement, Mr. Monroe. Any final thoughts for our audience? Darius nodded, his expression resolute. To anyone out there fighting for justice, remember this. Change starts with courage. Whether it's standing up to racism or rebuilding broken systems, every action matters. Together, we can rewrite the future. As the audience cheered, Gavin slumped in his chair, defeated. But Darius wasn't celebrating victory, not yet. There was still work to be done. As the studio audience continued to applaud Darius's bold move, Gavin Holt sat fuming, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of exposure. But Darius wasn't done yet. He turned toward Dominique Hayes, his tone sharp and deliberate. There's one more thing you need to hear, he said, pulling out his phone. This is a recording from an internal meeting at Gavin's company. A meeting where he explicitly admits to targeting minority tenants for eviction. Dominique's eyes widened as she accepted the device, playing the audio over the studio speakers. The voice was unmistakably Gavin's. We clear out these neighborhoods, flip the properties, and bring in higher-paying clients. Simple economics. The room fell silent save for the collective gasp that rippled through the audience. Gavin's face turned pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. That's illegal, someone shouted from the crowd. Gavin stammered, trying to defend himself. It's taken out of context. You're twisting my words. But the damage was irreversible. The clip went viral instantly, replayed across social media platforms within minutes. Hashtags like Gavin exposed and systemic racism in action trended worldwide, drowning out any attempt at damage control. Darius leaned forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. You wanted to call me naive, Mr. Holt? Fine. I'll wear that label proudly if it means standing against people like you. Because, while you've spent years profiting off others' suffering, I'm choosing to fight for those who can't fight back. Gavin stood abruptly, knocking over his chair in frustration. This isn't over, he barked, pointing a finger at Darius. It ended the moment you decided greed mattered more than humanity. Darius shot back, his voice unwavering. Security escorted Gavin off the set as the audience erupted into cheers once again. Dominique wrapped up the segment with a pointed conclusion. Folks, tonight we witnessed accountability in action. Let's hope this marks the beginning of real change. As the cameras cut away, Darius exhaled deeply, feeling the enormity of what had just transpired. It wasn't just about defeating Gavin, it was about proving that justice could prevail, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. But as he left the stage, he knew the hardest battles were still ahead. Rebuilding communities, repairing trust, and challenging systemic inequities wouldn't happen overnight. Still, the fire burning inside him burned brighter than ever. In the days following the explosive interview, Gavin Holt's empire collapsed with astonishing speed. Lawsuits poured in from former tenants seeking restitution, investors pulled their funding, and business partners distanced themselves publicly. To avoid association, his name became synonymous with corruption and exploitation, splashed across headlines nationwide. Once lavish properties now stood empty, foreclosed due to mounting legal fees. High-profile friends stopped returning his calls, and luxury clubs revoked his memberships. The man who once strutted through life untouchable found himself utterly alone, ostracized by the same society he'd sought to dominate. For Darius, watching Gavin's downfall wasn't about vindication, it was about validation. People were finally paying attention to the systemic injustices he'd fought so hard to expose. News outlets began investigating similar cases, shining a light on discriminatory practices across industries. Yet despite the victories, Darius refused to revel in Gavin's misery. This isn't about revenge, he told Rachel during a quiet moment. It's about making sure no one else has to suffer because of men like him. Rachel nodded, her expression thoughtful. Still, there's something poetic about seeing him lose everything he worked so hard to protect. Darius smiled faintly. Maybe, but the real win will be when we replace what he destroyed with something better. Even as Gavin faded into obscurity, his legacy served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that unchecked power inevitably leads to ruin. And though Darius knew the road ahead would be long, he took solace in knowing they'd struck a blow against injustice that resonated far beyond one man's failures. With Gavin's fall came a surge of support for Darius Monroe. Social media flooded with messages praising his courage and integrity, hailing him as a symbol of resilience and hope. Letters arrived daily from strangers sharing their own experiences with discrimination, thanking him for inspiring them to speak up. I didn't realize how many people felt invisible until now. One note read, "You made us believe we matter." Another, simply stated, "Thank you for showing us what bravery looks like." The outpouring of gratitude humbled Darius, grounding him in the knowledge that his actions had sparked something greater than himself. Media outlets clamored for interviews, eager to highlight his journey from waiter to advocate. Yet Darius remained steadfast, redirecting attention to the larger cause. "This isn't about me," he emphasized during a press conference. "It's about every person fighting for equality, fairness, and justice. If my story inspires even one person to stand up, then it's worth it." His humility only endeared him further to the public. Fundraisers organized in his name raised millions for affordable housing initiatives, with donations pouring in from all corners of the globe. Celebrities endorsed his efforts, amplifying the message of systemic reform. Behind the scenes, Darius worked tirelessly alongside Rachel and Miriam to launch pilot programs aimed at revitalizing displaced communities. They partnered with local leaders, ensuring projects were community-driven and sustainable. Progress was slow but steady, each step bringing them closer to tangible change. Through it all, Darius carried a quiet confidence, not arrogance, but faith in the power of collective action. He knew setbacks would come, challenges would arise, and critics would doubt. But he also knew the movement he'd ignited couldn't be extinguished. As momentum grew, so did his resolve. This wasn't the end of the fight. It was the start of a new chapter. One where privilege gave way to purpose, and justice became not just a dream, but a reality within reach. Miriam Monroe's transformation surprised even Darius. Once reluctant to confront her past, she threw herself fully into the housing initiative. Determined to make amends, her wealth and influence proved invaluable, opening doors that might otherwise have remained closed. "I owe these families more than apologies," she confessed during a planning meeting. "I owe them action. Real, meaningful change." Her sincerity won over skeptics, including some of the very communities she'd once harmed. Town hall meetings allowed residents to voice concerns directly to Miriam, holding her accountable while acknowledging her efforts to do better. "She's putting in the work," one attendee remarked. "And that counts for something." Darius watched with pride as his aunt embraced her role in the movement. Together, they navigated the delicate balance between accountability and redemption, proving that growth was possible, even after grave mistakes. Their partnership became a model for collaboration, showing that bridging divides required vulnerability, humility, and mutual respect. For Miriam, it meant shedding the trappings of privilege to stand shoulder to shoulder with those she'd wronged. For Darius, it meant forgiving without forgetting, trusting without blind faith. "You're doing good work, Aunt Miriam," he told her one evening as they reviewed blueprints for a new housing complex. She smiled softly, her eyes glistening. "Because you believed I could. Thank you for giving me this chance." It was a fragile peace forged through pain and perseverance, but as they looked toward the future, both knew the bond they'd rebuilt was stronger than ever, a testament to the healing power of shared purpose. In the aftermath of the scandal, the Grand Table faced its own reckoning. Customers boycotted the restaurant, accusing Natalie Cross of enabling Gavin Holt's behavior by prioritizing his patronage over ethics. Faced with plummeting revenue and mounting criticism, Natalie knew she had to act decisively or risk losing everything. She reached out to Darius personally, her voice trembling with remorse. "I owe you an apology, and more than that, I owe you a chance to make things right." True to her word, Natalie offered Darius not just his job back, but a stake in the restaurant itself. "You've shown me what it means to stand up for justice," she said during their meeting. "Let's transform this place into something better, something inclusive." Together, they implemented sweeping changes, fair hiring practices, training programs focused on cultural sensitivity, and partnerships with local minority-owned businesses to source ingredients. A portion of profits was earmarked for community initiatives, ensuring the restaurant gave as much as it gained. The transformation wasn't easy. Longtime staff members resisted new policies, while skeptical patrons questioned whether the changes were genuine. But Darius remained steadfast, leading by example and fostering open dialogue with employees and customers alike. Slowly but surely, the Grand Table became a beacon of progress. Families who once felt unwelcome now dined alongside longtime patrons, sharing stories and laughter. Community events hosted at the restaurant drew crowds eager to support its mission of inclusivity. For Darius, the revitalized space symbolized hope, a reminder that even institutions built on exclusion could evolve into pillars of equity. And for Natalie, it marked a redemption arc she never thought possible. As she raised a toast to Darius on reopening night, her gratitude was palpable. "This isn't my restaurant anymore. It's ours. Thank you for believing we could do better, Darius." smiled, raising his glass in return. Better is just the beginning. Months later, Darius found himself standing behind the counter at the grand table, mentoring a young black boy named Malik who dreamed of becoming an entrepreneur. Wide-eyed and full of questions, Malik peppered Darius with inquiries about perseverance, ambition, and overcoming obstacles. How do you succeed when people keep telling you no? Malik asked, his brow furrowed with determination. Darius paused, considering the question carefully before responding. Success isn't just about winning, Malik. It's about lifting others while you climb. Every time someone tells you no, use it as fuel to prove them wrong, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. Malik nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the wisdom. So it's like building a ladder for other people? Exactly, Darius affirmed, smiling warmly. And sometimes that ladder starts with small steps, like believing in yourself when no one else does. Their conversation continued long after closing time, weaving through tales of resilience, sacrifice, and triumph. Darius shared stories from his own journey, emphasizing the importance of community and collective effort. You don't have to fight alone, he told Malik. Find allies who share your vision. Build networks that amplify your voice. Together you can achieve far more than you ever could alone. Inspired, Malik left that evening clutching a notebook filled with ideas for his future business. As he walked away, Darius felt a surge of pride, not unlike the pride Miriam and Rachel expressed whenever they saw how far he'd come. Later that night, Darius reflected on the ripple effect of his actions. What began as a single act of defiance had grown into a movement empowering countless lives. From displaced families regaining homes to young dreamers finding courage to pursue their passions, the impact stretched farther than he'd imagined. He realized then that true success wasn't measured by accolades or wealth, but by the legacy one left behind. By empowering others to rise, he ensured the cycle of injustice would break, and the future would shine brighter for generations to come. This story is just the beginning. Real change starts when we amplify voices that challenge injustice. Like this video to support the fight against systemic racism, and share it with friends who need to hear this message. Together, we can inspire action and create a ripple effect of hope. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that spark conversations and drive meaningful change. Let's rewrite the future one story at a time.